Did you guys you got an extra 2 hours of sleep. Why are you not happy? You should be really happy. You got a relaxing day. Yes, are most of your classes full? Yeah, except for today because tennis is out. All right, so take a minute and set up your page, and we're going to do notes on B5B. So we have, this is 2-9, and this is Unit 9, mitosis and meiosis, and this is period 7. Okay, so we're doing B5B. And B5B says that you're going to describe the roles of DNA, describe the roles of DNA, RNA. Okay, stop there a second. RNA, what does it stand for? I got one. One of you guys, look to your people that you're seated with. RNA, tell them what it stands for. Ribonucleic acid. So ribonucleic acid. Now, knowing that RNA stands for ribonucleic acid, what's DNA? What's the D stand for? Deoxyribonucleic acid, right? Turn to your people and say that one. It is not too incredibly painful and difficult for you people to turn to your people and say deoxyribonucleic acid, okay? I'm pretty sure you have enough energy to do that. So we have described the roles of DNA and RNA and environmental factors. In the process of cell differentiation. So cell differentiation, and that's actually, the word differentiation is really big, but it just means, hey, how do they become different? Because think of all the cells in your body. Why aren't you just one big blob? Because don't they all have the exact same DNA? Well, yeah, right here. Yes, they do. All cells in an organism have the exact same DNA. All of your cells have the exact same DNA, so why don't they all look alike? Why aren't you just one big blob of cells? Something has to be happening for that. One thing we know is that your sex cells are definitely not the same, so I'm going to say except gametes. What's another word for gametes? Yes? Another word for gametes, what are they? Sex cells. You guys are half dead today. Sex cells. Tell me the two sex cells in a human. Yeah, sperm and egg. Okay, so why aren't the gametes the same as your other body cells? Why isn't their DNA the exact same? Because they, say it again? They do definitely different things. What else? How is it different from your other cells? Does it have the same amount of DNA? No. Remember they have half? Right? So the sperm cell has half the number of chromosomes, the egg cell has half the number of chromosomes as the rest of the body cells, so that when they unite, then you have the full thing. So, except for the gametes, all your other cells in your body have the exact same DNA. They're made from the exact same DNA. So how is it possible that they're not all exactly alike? I mean, obviously your skin cells look different from your bone cells, which look different from your muscle cells. You saw the muscles in the frog, that's what your muscles look like. And those look different from fat cells. Even though the fat bodies in the frog were in different places, fat cells basically look like that and feel like that. They're kind of oily, greasy. So they don't look the same, they don't act the same. So that's what we're focused on. And I'll tell you, the big question, it seems like a little question, but the big question is, how can cells be so different from each other in one organism? And I say it's a big question because the answer is massive. It's a lot of information, a lot of detailed information. So we're not going to get into massive detail today. We're going to talk about in generalities, this is what happens to differentiate your cells. So one of the things we talked about, or that we can discuss when we talk about cell differentiation, is that not all the DNA is expressed in every cell. So all of our cells have the same DNA, right? But not all of the DNA is expressed. There's a word that we'll use a lot when we talk about DNA. Expressed Another word for that would be activated in every cell. So that means even though every single one of my cells has the same stuff, has the same DNA, they're not all using it all. I mean, I've got cells inside my pancreas, only cells in my body that are making insulin. My bone cells have that DNA, but they're not making insulin. My muscle cells have the DNA, but they're not making insulin. None of the other cells do that. I have cells that make adrenaline. The only cells that make adrenaline are on my adrenal glands that are sitting on top of the kidneys. All the cells, every single cell has the information to make adrenaline, but those are the only cells that make those. So what happens is we realize that even though they all have that same DNA, not all the DNA is used, expressed, activated. It's not all functioning. Yes?
Is adrenaline a hormone?
Adrenaline is a hormone, yes. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, how did we get from a fertilized egg, which is just one cell, right? To a multicellular organism? How did we do that? Well, part of the reason is we can talk about even though we all have the same DNA in every single cell in our body, it doesn't mean that it's all being used at the exact same time. So this means that cell differentiation occurs. So when we know that not all our cells are alike, if I can spell today, not all cells are alike, this means that cell differentiation has to occur. We know it does. It's just common sense. And cell differentiation is just talking about a process by which a cell becomes specialized. Why isn't it just a blob cell? Because it's been specialized to do something. Tomorrow we'll do a lab and we're going to be talking about how do cells become specialized, and you're going to see a lot of different kinds of cells that we have. So cell differentiation is the process by which a cell becomes specialized. And they do this, they become specialized in order to perform a specific function. The muscle cells are really unique, and because of how they're shaped, how they're built, what kinds of things are in them, they are able to slide past each other and bunch up. Your muscles can contract. They can change their shape easily, the whole bunch of them at a time, and they can relax. They can stretch back out again. Your bone cells don't do that. Your red blood cells don't do that. Your nerve cells don't do that. So they're very unique. They have a very specific function, and that's what cell differentiation is all about. Now, I'm already tired of writing out the word differentiation, so I'm going to abbreviate it here. So cell, I'm just going to put DIFFER. Cell differentiation is caused by first and foremost, you have controlled modifications that occur through gene expression. They're not just random, they're very controlled. And you say, well, how are they controlled? That's the big answer. Well, you know, they'll talk, and when you start reading up on this, you hear a lot about chemical gradients within the cells that actually end up turning some genes on and some genes off. And even saying that phrase is not enough. It's just really intense. It's really high level there. So you have controlled modifications. Can I put mods for modifications? Do you guys know what that word that means? That mods, modifications? Controlled modifications that occur through gene expression. There's that word expression again. And when we talk about gene expression, it means that the info from a gene is used to make a protein. And we haven't talked about protein synthesis. I think you guys might have talked about it a little bit in 8th grade. but just in general making proteins. When we talk about this, it means that information from a gene is used to make a protein. Okay, so I'm not sure what you know already and what you don't. So I know you know that the DNA is this long double helix and it's made of, looks like a twisted ladder. It's made of the A's, G's, C's, and T's, right? And those letters you can have a DNA that's tens of thousands of letters long like that, even more than that, 100,000 of them. And you know that one section of the DNA that has the information to make one protein, that's called a gene, right? Yes, no? Okay? If you haven't heard that before, you have now. So one section that has the information to make one protein is called a gene. And you can have tens of thousands of genes on one chromosome. So what happens is we say there's gene expression. When your cell makes the protein from that one gene, we say that's gene expression or protein synthesis. So in this case, what they're saying is there's very controlled gene expression in a particular cell. Which genes are they going to use? That's what they're talking about here. Which genes will be used? That's what we talk about when we say gene expression. Which genes are going to be used in a particular cell? So one of the ways that cells can be differentiated is that not all the genes are expressed in every cell here. The next one, and another way, it's kind of like saying the same thing in a different way here. The cells are not using the same sections of DNA. So these two are basically saying the same thing. I'm just wording it differently so it sounds a little bit different here. The cells are not using the same genes or the same sections of DNA. Maybe they're not even using the same chromosomes. And when we talk about those sections of DNA, we're talking about the genes again. So, and it could be that maybe in your eyeball cells, let's say in the back, did you guys dissect the cow eyeball? No cow eyeball. So, again, take anatomy. When you get a chance, take anatomy because you'll dissect the cow eyeball, and it's really cool. It looks like yours, only a lot bigger. So okay, so you have that clear layer over the front of your eye called the cornea. If you peel that off, you have the colored part of your eye, that's the iris, and that's a muscle tissue. And then there's that black thing in the middle, that's a hole. Okay, so there's a hole right there in the middle. When we talk about our pupil, if you peel the cornea off, you could stick a thing through it. The only thing is the lens of your eyeball is butted up right against that. The lens is made of these cells that are clear. I mean, it just amazes me sometimes. Your body makes cells that are transparent. And just think about that a minute. You could, if they were elsewhere in your body, if you had a transparent stomach, you could see all your guts on the inside. It's just kind of weird. But your body makes these cells that are transparent. So that's the lens, and it can change shape. And then if you pull out the whole eyeball and cut it in half, the inside back of the eyeball, you have these little cells called cones and rods, the retina back there. And so you have all these cells that are very, very unique to that. Those cells, maybe those cones and rods that cones see color, rods see in dark and light, maybe those cells don't even use chromosome number 4. I don't know, I'm just making that up, right? Maybe they don't even use it. They don't use the genes that are on there. Maybe they're using chromosomes 13 and 18 and 17 or 1 or something like that. They have a group that they're mainly using, and that's really what they use. So it just depends on what the cell is, on what type of cell it is, what genes it uses, maybe even what chromosomes. Because really, are you going to be using the X or Y chromosome, do you think, when it talks about eye color for the most part, or whether or not you see in black and white? That's a loaded question. Any of you guys colorblind? Yeah? So think about this. Colorblind. You guys know what colorblind is, right? They have issues seeing certain colors. Colorblindness is a sex-linked trait. Yeah? It's only found on the X chromosome. So even though we think, oh, the X and Y chromosomes, they determine your sex. Well, yeah, they do, but they also happen to have genes on it that talk about whether or not you can see in color. So it's nice to say, we can say, oh yeah, they package up that one chromosome and stick it over to the side, but that's not necessarily always the way it is, because your genes are just kind of mixed all up inside there, what codes for what in there. So it's kind of weird. The vast majority of people who are colorblind are males. So since a male has only one X and one Y, if he's got that gene from the mother, it's going to show up he's going to be colorblind. The female has one X from the mom, one X from the dad. So if she got one gene that said one chromosome that was bad that had the color blindness on it, she's got a chance over here that says not colorblind, and that's dominant. So yeah, so the vast majority of sex-linked traits are usually males have it more than females. Yeah, and we'll talk about that when we talk about genetics too. Okay, so the cells are not all using the same sections of DNA, maybe not even the same chromosomes that are in there. Another thing here is that cells use the same genes, but not in the same proportions. This is a weird sounding one. So the cells, let's say they're using the same gene, but they're not using it in the same proportions. Okay, so let me give you an example of something like this. If I make chili, I use chili powder. My husband and I, when we make chili, we use the same recipe, but I don't like hot stuff, so I don't use a ton of chili powder. My husband, however, likes hot stuff, and when he makes it, he uses the chili powder in a much greater proportion than what I do. And so it's the same chemical, right? But he's using a lot more of it. Same here. It's the same gene, but one cell may be using it a lot more than the other cells do. And so you get a different kind of thing going on in both of those. Does that make sense to you guys when I say it like that? Yeah. Okay, so some cells are going to be used, they're using the same genes, but they're not going to be used in the same proportions, or not at the same time. Like maybe the same time in your lifespan. Okay, so let me give you an example of that. Can a 4-year-old have babies? Male or female, doesn't matter. Can they reproduce? No, because the genes are not turned on. They haven't made it through puberty yet, right? So there's a certain time frame, and it's a gap. It just depends on genetically on your background. There's a certain time frame when your body will kick in and start making hormones that develop the secondary sex characteristics and enable you to have children. Yeah? When is a matter, because the genes are all there in your cell, but they may not be used yet. They may not be clicked on yet. So there are a time frame where that happens. I have some gray hairs coming in. That means I have some genes in my hair. I have some genes in my hair that are still making color. The gene is turned on and it's making color, but there are some cells that are making my hair that gene is turned off. So now it's not making color. So I have little gray pieces in here where it's not making color anymore. I had a friend in college. She was 18 and she started going gray. And that was a genetic characteristic where they call it premature grayness, yeah, something like that. So what happened is that was just a genetic characteristic or trait that they had in their family. And so some genes turn on and off at different times. It doesn't just have to be humans that we're talking about, though. Sometimes it's even turned off and on by caused by different things here. So it could be something that's environmental. Environmental factors can turn genes on and off. And you know this instinctively. If I have an Arctic fox and it's cold outside, his fur is going to be white, right? During the summertime, what happens? Yeah, it turns brown. If I take that Arctic fox and I put him down in a zoo in South Texas, he is never going to be white. He's going to be brown all the time, right? It just doesn't get cold enough. Temperature can have an impact and cause some genes to turn on. Now, if they take that same fox and they put him in an enclosed zoo area where they've got it air conditioned where it's really cold, then he's going to turn white. He'll grow that fur. So sometimes things like temperature.
And flamingos, if they don't eat enough shrimp, they'll be white.
Yeah, so you have things like that, even different chemicals. Chemicals would be one of them. The amount of light. For example, in trees that lose their leaves during the fall, it's how much light that they get that controls that. You take that same tree and you put him in a greenhouse, and you manage the light on him, and he's never going to lose his leaves. So it's all about different things. So different things can trigger when genes turn on and turn off. They can be outside environmental factors. Even when you think internal factors, think when people ingest cigarette smoke causing cancer and stuff, you can even have internal factors, good ones or bad ones, it doesn't matter. But enzymes chemicals in your cytoplasm. So a lot of these things can have an impact on whether or not a gene turns on and off. Sometimes we associate that with diseases, sometimes not. Sometimes it's just natural for it to happen like that.
Isn't like stress linked to gray hair and white too?
A lot of times stress will do that. Stress will cause a lot of weird things to happen. Stress can cause the lining of your stomach that makes the hydrochloric acid. It can cause it to produce more hydrochloric acid, so it can kind of crank it up, say, hey, make more. And that's another thing that your body makes via DNA. So, it's got that process to do that. So, yeah, stress can have an impact. Yeah, they've linked a lot of that. Yes.
Hydrochloric acid, what does it, like if you have too much of it, what happens?
So you have, the hydrochloric acid is made by cells that line the stomach, right? You also have cells lining the stomach that make mucus to protect some of those cells from that hydrochloric acid, because the hydrochloric acid will kill the cells. So you have two things. You've got the cells that make the acid, and then you have the cells that make the mucus that line it so the acid doesn't damage it. If you make too much acid, you guys have had indigestion before? Yeah, or you've heard of acid reflux? Yeah, so your stomach, you remember from the frog, it's a J-shaped organ, so in acid reflux, some of that hydrochloric acid comes up out of the stomach, so there's a little round valve on the top of the stomach that kind of closes off. When you swallow, it opens it up. When you close it off, but you can leak stuff back out through it, and when you have that acid reflux, it means it's come back up into the esophagus and it starts to burn, and so it's burning tissue. When you guys have all thrown up before, it burns when it comes up. It's the same basic thing, only it's happening just without you throwing up. So yeah, you can have stuff like that. It can burn a hole through the mucus, so you constantly have to make more mucus. You have to constantly make new cells in there and everything. So it's a constant process. So those cells that are lining your stomach are continually replacing themselves. Yeah? So they're going through mitosis quite a bit, as opposed to, say, your muscle cells that aren't doing a lot, or maybe even your brain cells that aren't going through mitosis almost at all.
Sounds like the stomach eating itself.
Yes. Yeah, and you have to be careful, make sure it doesn't. Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, and this is just, again, it's chemicals, but I'm really focused on what chemicals it is. We're off and on, I was letting somewhere. Okay, so the last one I'm going to talk about proteins. And you have protein signals from other cells that can turn things on and off. And when I'm talking about these proteins, they're probably proteins and fats too, but they're hormones. So you have hormones, you have hormones that tell your body when to grow. You guys have all heard of the growth plate before, right? The growth plate in some of your long bones. So my growth plates, my brain sent out hormones, sent messages out to other things that told them to close off the growth plate. So I'm not growing taller anymore. At some point in your life, that's going to happen. For some of you guys, it's already started. For some of you guys, it won't finish until a little bit later on. But those are caused by hormones. So you have all this chemical signaling throughout your body to do that. So when we talk about cell differentiation, there are several things that can cause genes to turn on and off that allow our cells to differentiate. Tomorrow we're going to do a lab where you're going to look at those cells and see what types of characteristics a lot of different cells have. Okay? All right, so what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to take out your POGL pages from yesterday, pages 5 through 10.